gamers and I wanted to share my thoughts on the Razer mouse and keyboard I've been using. Now they're not sold as a set, but I'm talking about them together for a reason, which I'll explain later. But first, look at the B-roll. Okay, so as you can see, there's some serious wear and tear to the keyboard, but we'll come back to the pros and cons list in a minute. Now, I am talking about both of these items in the same video because even though they're not sold as a set, I did buy them at the same time. Okay, so a little backstory. I had quit gaming for about a decade to get some experience working a real job. Spent some time with friends and family, maybe party a little bit way too much and, you know, touch grass. No, not that kind of grass. Like actual grass. Okay, anyway, I was bored during COVID and decided that I wanted to start gaming again, and I was in search of a new mouse and keyboard since I was stuck across the country and all my old gaming stuff was back in New York. Since I'm currently on a budget, but I'm kind of a sucker for quality goods, after a lot of poking around on the internet, I sort of landed on this mouse and this keyboard. So let's talk about the mouse first. So this is a Razer Basilisk X Hyperspeed wireless gaming mouse. It's both Bluetooth and wireless compatible, and it is up to 16,000 DPI optical sensor. It has 6 programmable buttons and 450 hour-ish battery life. This one I got is in classic black. I'm not really sure if it comes in other colors. My guess is maybe there's signature green, but it's available on Amazon for about 40 bucks. I included the link below if you wanted to check on some of the product details. And so now on to the pros and cons. Okay, so first off, at $40, it may not be the cheapest mouse on Amazon, but it's a pretty good price point. I generally prefer to either go as cheap as possible with a quality that I can accept in terms of usability and longevity, and I'd say this one fits both. Which brings me to point 2. Build quality. I got this towards the end of 2022, and so 2 years or so later, it's still in fairly good condition. I do clean my gear after almost every use, if not at least once a week, so maybe keep that in mind because some mice do tend to deal better with the whole gunk buildup than others. I just prefer not to find that out, so yeah. It's relatively comfortable. The ergonomic shape with the thumb grip and the sloping forward in the front is a nice shape in general. I think it's pretty common in a lot of gaming mice slash ergonomic mice. The buttons all click pretty nicely. The scroll wheel is nice and big with the squared edge, sort of with a little bit of a texture on top, so it makes it actually really easy to use both as a scroll wheel and as sort of like an additional clicking button. So for me, like when I play Apex or something, it's what I use to ping, and it's definitely a lot easier than my previous gaming mouse, so that's really a big plus. Okay, the thumb buttons work perfectly fine and are pretty standard in terms of responsiveness. All in all, a pretty easy recommendation to give. Yeah, if you don't have the 40 bucks to spare, obviously, you know, get something a little bit cheaper. Just, you know, you get what you pay for. I'd say with this one, you actually get more than what you pay for, so no real issue there. I will share with you some cons for me that may just be personal preference. But who knows, maybe you have similar concerns, and I like to have as much info as possible before I make my purchases. Okay, so the first thing is the size. I have tiny hands, like spectacularly small hands. So if you have small hands like me, it's really not that comfortable in long sessions. I definitely notice much faster hand fatigue onset than with my old Logitech gaming mouse, which was much smaller all around. while your hand muscles can sort of build a bit of tolerance, like I'm able to game a lot longer than I could when I first got it, it's still an issue for me after 2 years in. So just FYI on that. Okay, now, so the weight is another point for me. Okay, I tend to like a lighter mouse, not super light where it's like flying around on the mouse pad. But this one feels just a couple of ounces heavier than I'd like. Then again, it's wireless, so maybe I'm just like a wired mouse person. But it's actually fairly light until you add in the battery, and then all of a sudden it feels vastly different. But you know, you're always gonna have a battery in it, so just know that whatever weight they list, make sure you check the weight with the battery, not without. Okay, so that brings me to my next point, which is the weight distribution. Again, personal preference, but I like mine to be fairly evenly distributed. And so this one, because the battery is in the back, it's heavily favored. It's like heavily favoring the back end. And so it's not, again, not a crazy issue. It's just when I try to move, you know, when I'm trying to move left to right, right? If the weight is evenly distributed, it's gonna move left to right. But if the weight, like this one is, distributed more toward the back, when I move left to right, because the front is lighter, it tends to kind of arc more than it just moves. And so, not a crazy thing. I think, you know, over time you'll kind of adjust to it, but it's just one of those things where I just prefer it to be more evenly distributed, so I don't have to kind of deal with that small adjustment at all. Okay, and so the last thing, which is probably so small that it's just a me thing, honestly, I think, you know, again, 40 bucks is pretty good, but the forward and back button on the thumb kind of makes this weird plasticky clacking noise for me, and it's not super loud per se, it's just, I just don't like that sound. So again, probably just a me thing, but you know, clack, 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 clack. For hours on end, it's not that pleasant for me. So that's the mouse. Next up is the keyboard, and this one I have some thoughts on. Okay, so this is a Razer BlackWidow TE Chroma V2 TKL. TE stands for Tournament Edition and TKL stands for 10 keyless mechanical gaming keyboard. I'm not really sure what 10 keyless means, so if anybody out there knows, if you can help me out and just leave a comment below. Too lazy to look it up at this point. But basically it has yellow key switches, which means it's supposedly linear and silent, and has chroma RGB lighting, magnetic wrist rest, and programmable macros, and it comes in classic black. I believe it comes in white. I'm not entirely sure, so don't quote me on that. But just take a look on Amazon and you can find out. So right now on Amazon it says it sells for $120. But it says it's on sale from $140. So definitely not super budget friendly. But when I got it, it was on sale for 90 bucks. So I got a pretty good deal on it at the time. Still not super cheap, since my friend has since recommended a compact mechanical keyboard from Amazon for less than half of what I paid. But, you know, I sort of just looked at some of the brands that I knew and looked for options that they had that may have come in a good deal or come in at least a somewhat reasonable price. And so I figured, you know, maybe I'd get better luck with a trusted brand like Razer. But who knows, you know, I guess I'll check back with my friend in 2 years and see if his keyboard is still working well or not. Okay, so the keyboard is pretty straightforward. Definitely love me some rainbow LEDs. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward, standard keyboard, and not so much to write home about, because there's two major issues for me. One, not so much necessarily a problem, but definitely just FYI is that it is not silent. I don't care what it says that it's silent, it is not. Okay, so the issue with it is it might be potentially slightly quieter than, let's say, your normal red switches, but it's louder than a normal non-mechanical keyboard still. And I'm not entirely sure that's so much the switch design themselves so much as the key design. Okay, so the switch doesn't actually make noise, right? If I slowly depress the key, when the letter actually starts typing, the noise doesn't come in. But right after you trigger the switch, the key makes contact with the bottom part, okay? And because it's so plasticky, and the depth of the key presses themselves, the keys make a noise when they hit the bottom, and then when you let go of the key and they bounce back and they sort of hit that top point, it makes another clack. So the whole time you're typing, even if the switches aren't, like the switches themselves don't make noise, but just the design of it, there's no point in a silent switch if the keyboard itself, like if the keys itself is just going clack, 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 clack anyway, I might as well just get a regular red switch. Basically, anyone sharing a room or space with you will still want to kick you in the shin, no matter if you're smashing your keys playing League of Legends or if you're typing a corporate resignation letter to become a full-time gamer. Okay, so this brings me to the actual typing, which is a true pain point of this entire story. The trigger of my everyday life that makes my left eyelid twitch almost the bane of my existence, making me want to just unplug this thing and type on my laptop, which the keys on that aren't great either. Actually, they're pretty horribly designed. So typing on this keyboard is a nightmare. If any of you know how to fix it, or at least know like why it's doing it, please tell me in the comments below, because it has just been driving me crazy. Okay, it randomly and consistently adds keystrokes, especially with the U, C, K, the comma, the apostrophe, and then the / keys. All keys that I use fairly often. Okay, and it's like the ghost of Razer is living in my friggin' keyboard, and it is like the ultimate troll whenever I try to type anything. Could you imagine, like, anytime you type about is like ABOUUUT, and then every time you're typing like a web address or like, I don't know, type aren't, and it's like AREN apostrophe. So you're constantly hitting delete just to get your typing right. I can't even talk about the rest of the keyboard functions, because that one thing alone makes me question if I ever could buy another Razer keyboard. I mean, is it one of those that I just got a dud, which is really unfortunate, but that just seems like maybe it's a common design flaw with the way the switches are. And so, yeah, I don't know. I know that's probably pretty harsh, but hey, if you guys have other experiences, let me know, because especially considering how much I love their laptops, and I've always wanted one of those. I can't get down with this keyboard, and as soon as I can replace it, I will. Anyway, aside from that, as you can see from the B-roll right there, the coating on the keys are pretty thin, so it's worn through, and now instead of like a cool lit letter, I have two kind of ugly blobs glowing all the time for the keys. And you may say I'm maybe aping my keys too hard, but I used my old Logitech keyboard for like 3+ years, grinding World of Warcraft daily for 14 hours a day, and did not have that issue. I actually recently went back and looked at the keyboard. I thought about bringing it, but it looks a little bit shiny from where the wear and tear was, but the coating's still pretty fully intact. It doesn't actually look like, even from the shiny parts, that it was going to wear through anytime soon. my guess is it probably could last another like 2 or 3 years, if not more than that actually. And this wrist rest is kind of just gross looking once the fake leather starts peeling off. Don't get me wrong, when I first got it, I was pretty excited about it because it looked pretty sleek, you know, when I took it out of the box. But it's specifically a gaming keyboard. You have to expect someone to be rubbing their hands on this thing like 8 hours a day, every day. Like, this can't be unexpected, right? So mind you, the foam actually feels fine once the leather peels off. And actually the leather part kind of sticks a little bit if you start getting a little bit sweaty, or if you just like rest on it for too long and, you know, the heat of it. So I'm not really sure why they went with that, other than maybe it looked a little bit more higher end, but realistically it's just like the foam is pretty durable and you can still press a logo onto it. So not sure why they did that. I might even sit there and just like peel the whole top layer off just so there's not like this weird hole right there. The last little thing is sort of not really relevant to the usability or performance of the keyboard itself so much as just a little bit of a pet peeve. They included this magnetic wrist rest, right? Or maybe it's called a palm rest since I rest my palms on it and not my wrist. But anyway, as you can see, it stays pretty put. So I can move my keyboard around, but if I pick it up and put it back down, it snaps right back into place. That's actually super awesome because I do obsessively like things to line up. And so if it didn't snap together, I'd probably be adjusting it all the time. But why did they put this there? See, the keyboard has a special little logo light panel. It's not even like it's a little etched out logo, right? Where it's like the whole thing's made of the same thing and they just kind of carved it out so the light can come through. No, it's entirely made of a different material. They had to cut out this whole area and find a way to attach this little bit. It looks super cool, but I only really got to see it like when I first plugged this thing in. Otherwise, look, you almost never see it. Again, it looks super cool, beautiful detail to add, and I love the magnetic palm rest. Love that it's magnetic. But the two just seem to not really go together. I can't imagine no one thought that these two things would clash. Am I missing something here? Does anybody out there know something that I don't? Anyway, so okay, that's it for this review. Quick recap, if you don't have the budget for a high-end gaming mouse, the Razer wireless mouse is fantastic for the price point. I love that it can travel with it without, you know, needing another piece of wire to worry about, and any cons with the thing can pretty much be justified by the price point, in my opinion. The keyboard, I honestly wish I was still in the return period or had maybe gotten the standard red switch if those don't have the ghost keystrokes. Someone please let me know if you have the red switch version and if you have the same irritating issue. Thank you guys for watching and listening to me complain about my keyboard and talk about mouse gunk. GG's to you all and laters!